Isa thought she understood everything about God and the afterlife, until an unforeseen tragedy turned her world upside down. Now, she recounts her extraordinary near-death experience that upended everything she had ever believed about faith and eternity. My name is Isa Faruqi, and I'm 47 years old. I reside in a modest two-story home in Lansing, Michigan, where I have spent the majority of my adult life. Before the events that changed my existence, I was just an ordinary middle-aged mother, working as a pharmacy technician at the local CVS and raising two teenagers with my husband, Kareem. Born into a devout Muslim family, my faith had always been the core of my identity. I observed my prayers 5 times a day, never missing a single one, fasted diligently during Ramadan, and followed every religious teaching passed down to me since childhood. My parents had immigrated from Pakistan before my birth, ensuring that our household remained deeply rooted in Islamic traditions, even as we built our lives in America. That winter morning began like any other. I was preparing for my early shift, bustling around the kitchen to make breakfast for the kids before they left for school. The news murmured in the background, something about an approaching snowstorm expected later that week. I made a mental note to stop by the grocery store after work. What I didn't realize was that our carbon monoxide detector had not been functioning properly for weeks. The batteries had died, and in the chaos of daily life, both Kareem and I had overlooked replacing them during our regular home maintenance. Unbeknownst to us, our aging furnace had developed a crack in its heat exchanger, allowing the silent, invisible gas to seep into our home. As I packed lunches, a faint dizziness crept over me, but I dismissed it as simple fatigue. My daughter, Amira, complained of a headache and asked if she could stay home from school. My son, Zain, was already in the shower upstairs. Kareem had left early for his job at an engineering firm downtown. As I stood at the sink, loading the dishwasher, the dizziness intensified. My surroundings wavered, my vision dimming at the edges. I remember fumbling for my phone to dial 911, but my fingers felt strangely numb and uncoordinated. The last image seared into my mind was Amira's wide, fearful eyes as I collapsed onto the cold kitchen floor. I later learned that despite feeling ill herself, Amira had managed to call emergency services. Firefighters arrived within minutes, detecting lethal levels of carbon monoxide in the house. They pulled us all out just in time. Me, unconscious, Amira barely able to stand, and Zain, who had blacked out in the shower. The paramedics later told me that my heart had stopped in the ambulance for precisely 5 minutes and 14 seconds. I was clinically dead. But what I experienced in those moments felt like an eternity, and it altered everything I had ever believed about life, death, and what lay beyond. Now, as I reflect on my life, I see how every moment had been leading me toward that fateful event. Years of unwavering devotion, unquestioning faith, and strict adherence to religious teachings had not prepared me for what I was about to encounter. The doctor said I was incredibly fortunate. If Amira had hesitated even slightly before calling for help, if the first responders had been delayed by mere minutes, or if the carbon monoxide concentration had been marginally higher, none of us would have survived. But I now understand that luck played no role in my survival. What happened next was predestined, a divine revelation that would challenge everything I thought I knew. Throughout my life, I have evaluated my worth based on my adherence to religious obligations. Did I perform my prayers at the correct times? Did I dress modestly enough? Was I setting a righteous example for my children? These thoughts dictated my actions, shaping my daily decisions. My marriage to Kareem was built upon this shared foundation. We met at the Islamic Center of Greater Lansing during a community gathering. His family, much like mine, emphasized the importance of choosing a spouse who shared our faith. Together, we raised our children with the same principles, enrolling them in weekend Islamic school and ensuring they understood the significance of our beliefs. My job at CVS sometimes challenged my convictions. There were moments when I had to handle medications that conflicted with Islamic teachings or assist customers whose lifestyles opposed everything I had been taught. But I constantly reminded myself that judgment was not my burden to bear, that responsibility belonged to Allah alone. Yet, nothing in my lifetime of devotion had prepared me for what I encountered during those 5 minutes and 14 seconds beyond the threshold of life. It was a journey unlike any I had ever imagined, and it reshaped my understanding of faith, the afterlife, and what truly matters in the grand scheme of existence. If you are not subscribed, I recommend subscribing and activating the notification bell so you don't miss any videos. The morning of my near-death experience, I remember waking up with an overwhelming sense of gratitude, as if the universe had aligned just perfectly in my favor. The sun peeked through the blinds, casting golden slivers across my bedroom wall, and for a fleeting moment, I believed everything was exactly as it should be. Amira had just been accepted to Michigan State University on a full scholarship, something we had prayed for every single night. Zayn, after struggling through his first years of high school, was finally pulling his grades up. And Kareem, oh my dear, hard-working Kareem, had just received a well-deserved promotion. Life felt stable, predictable, and secure. Like we had played by the rules, and in return, we were being rewarded. Standing by the kitchen window, coffee cup warm between my palms, I watched the neighbor kids waiting for their school bus, their laughter curling into the icy Michigan air. Mrs. Peterson, bundled in her old wool coat, was shoveling her driveway, her breath visible in the cold. I made a mental note to send Zayn over later to help. Small acts of kindness, I believed, were what held the world together. In that moment, life felt unshakable. It was a feeling I had carried for so long, this belief that if you just did the right things, prayed enough, worked hard enough, loved deeply enough, then life would unfold in neat, predictable patterns. But oh, how naive I was. Because in just a few hours, every certainty I had ever clung to, every belief about life, death, and even God himself, would be shattered into pieces too small to put back together. People talk about near-death experiences as something that changes you, but change is too small a word. This wasn't just a shift in perspective. It was a complete undoing of the person I had been, a rebirth into something unrecognizable. In exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds, the foundation of my reality crumbled, and what emerged in its place was a truth so profound, so undeniable, that I have spent every moment since trying to share it with anyone willing to listen. That morning, I went about my routine unaware that it would be my last as the person I once was. By the time the sun set, I would carry a message, a warning, a revelation, a desperate plea for others to understand what truly awaits us beyond this life. The choices we make here, in this world, echo far beyond what we can comprehend. And the moment my heart stopped beating, I understood that in a way I never could have before. There was no gentle transition, no warm tunnel of light that others describe. It happened in an instant, a sudden, violent jolt, like being plunged into freezing water without warning. My heart had stopped. My body lay lifeless in the back of an ambulance, yet I was still aware. I saw everything with unsettling clarity. The paramedics moved with urgency, their voices muffled as if I were listening through thick glass. One of them, a young man with tired eyes, pressed hard against my chest, counting aloud as he performed compressions. Another was preparing the defibrillator, his hands shaking ever so slightly. And there I was, just lying there, pale, motionless, wearing my blue CVS uniform shirt and the silver necklace Kareem had given me for our anniversary. And yet, I wasn't afraid. If anything, I felt detached, like I was watching a scene from someone else's life. I noticed the strangest details, a coffee stain on the paramedic sleeve, a tiny crack in the ceiling of the ambulance shaped like a question mark. These little things, insignificant before, suddenly felt monumental. Then, as if the universe itself had exhaled, everything went dark. But this wasn't ordinary darkness. It wasn't the absence of light, it was something else entirely, heavy, oppressive, alive. I felt myself being pulled deeper and deeper into it, an invisible force guiding me into the unknown. And then, I was no longer alone. A presence emerged from the void, one so overwhelming, so beyond human comprehension, that even now, words fail me. It was neither comforting nor cruel, but something more immense. I knew, without a doubt, that it was an angel. Not the delicate, winged figures of paintings and greeting cards, but something ancient, something powerful beyond measure. Just being in its presence made my soul tremble. It did not speak, not in words, yet its voice filled my entire being. Images, emotions, and truths beyond anything I had ever conceived flooded into me. And in that moment, I understood. Everything I had once believed about life and death, about God and purpose, had been incomplete. There was so much more. More beauty, more consequence, more urgency. What I saw in those 4 minutes and 37 seconds changed everything. And now, I can never go back. I found myself caught in a moment of profound clarity, watching my entire life unfold before me, but not just the things I had done. I saw every single ripple that had been set into motion by my choices. It was as if the universe itself had unfolded, revealing the effects of every action, every word, and every thought. I saw moments I had long since forgotten, things that had seemed insignificant at the time, but in the grand scheme of things, they were anything but. I saw that time I'd been unkind to a coworker, something that felt like a fleeting annoyance at the moment but had left a scar on her spirit. That small, thoughtless action had colored her entire day, and I realized that I had unintentionally hurt her. But then, my heart softened as I saw the moment when I had helped an elderly customer with her prescriptions. A small gesture, one that I had barely thought about at the time, but it had given her the hope she desperately needed. It was one of those rare, pure moments where you realize that even the smallest act of kindness can change someone's life. But what hit me the hardest, the part that truly shattered me, was seeing the impact of my dedication to Islam. I had always believed that I was on the right path, that my devotion and my encouragement for others to follow stricter practices was a way to bring them closer to the truth. But as the angel showed me the full scope of it, I saw that my well-intentioned actions had pushed some of them further away from the truth. I felt my heart sink as the realization set in. My efforts had been misguided, and I had unknowingly misled others. I wanted to cry out, to defend myself, to justify my actions, but in the presence of this divine being, my words felt empty. How could I argue against the undeniable truth that the angel was showing me? It was like the scales had fallen from my eyes, revealing truths I had never seen before. The angel showed me historical events that had been hidden from me, truths about the Prophet Muhammad that had been obscured, altered, or erased over time. It was a devastating revelation. Everything I thought I knew, everything I had believed in, was being torn apart before me. And then, the darkness around us began to shift, to change. I could feel the presence of other souls, drifting through this vast spiritual space. Thousands, maybe millions, of them. Some were being pulled upward, toward a light I had never noticed before, while others were sinking downward, their spiritual forms growing dimmer with every passing second. The angel explained that these destinations were not arbitrary. They were the direct result of what each soul had believed in and how they had lived their lives. It was a sobering truth, one that made my heart ache for all those who had missed the mark. I saw people from all walks of life, Muslims, Buddhists, Hindus, and those who followed other faiths, each realizing too late that their sincere beliefs, however deep, had not been enough. They had chosen paths that led them away from the truth, paths that had seemed right at the time, but now, in the light of this divine truth, they saw it. They cried out to their gods and their prophets, but their pleas went unanswered. It was a heartbreaking sight. I could feel their despair, their confusion, as they realized they had been deceived. Their mistake was irreversible. They had chosen their beliefs without truly understanding the truth, and now they were trapped in the darkness. But then, the angel guided me closer to the souls that were descending. The experience was beyond terrifying. The anguish of these souls was so intense, so palpable, that it felt like a physical weight pressing down on my chest. I saw people I had known in my life. Good people, kind-hearted souls who had prayed diligently, given to charity, and lived what they believed to be righteous lives. Yet here they were, falling. Their prayers, their devotion, and their entire lives seemed to be for nothing. I recognized Brother Karim, who had led prayers at our mosque for decades. His face, once full of light, was now dim, and he was being dragged downward, still clutching his prayer beads. Sister Fatima, who had taught Quran classes to our children, stood beside him, her face filled with the same heartbreaking realization. All their efforts, all their devotion, had been in vain. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 1 below to let me know that you are still here with me. The angel showed me something that broke me even further, the souls of children who had passed away. My heart twisted as I saw the children of my community among them. But unlike the adults, these children were being drawn upward, toward the light. The angel explained that they were innocent, not yet fully shaped by the false beliefs of the world. They were untainted, untouched by the chains of tradition and misguidance that bound so many others. It brought me both comfort and sorrow. Comfort because I knew that these children were at peace, but sorrow because I knew that their parents would never be able to see them again, never get the chance to understand the truth that had been hidden from them. As we moved through this spiritual realm, I began to notice something else, something strange but unmistakable. Some souls were wearing chains, chains made of light. But they weren't physical chains. They were chains of belief, of tradition, of practices that had bound them in life. I could see my chains, glowing with Arabic calligraphy and Islamic symbols. They were beautiful, yes, but they were heavy, pulling me downward. It was a cruel irony. The very symbols that I had held dear, that I had thought would guide me, were now the very things weighing me down, keeping me from the light above. I realized, in that moment, that the path I had been following was not the one that would lead me to salvation. And the truth, that painful, heart-wrenching truth, was that I had to let go of everything I thought I knew to find a way out of this darkness. The angel led me into what can only be described as a grand, celestial courtroom, a space unlike any earthly structure I had ever seen. It was bathed in pure, radiant light, too bright, too holy for my eyes to comprehend fully. The souls before me stood in judgment, not simply for their actions, but for the beliefs they had clung to when the truth had been laid before them. As each soul stepped forward, their entire life was revealed, every choice, every moment of disregard for the truth. It was a humbling, agonizing experience, for it became clear that belief wasn't just a matter of actions, but of understanding that had been available to them all along. I witnessed a woman I recognized from our mosque, someone whose face had been so familiar in my life. The angel showed me every time she had encountered Christian missionaries, every time she had seen a church or heard the gospel message but dismissed it. Every instance, no matter how small, became a damning witness against her. The truth had been offered, but she had chosen to ignore it, holding on to her beliefs despite the signs. I felt a deep sorrow as I realized how many of us, myself included, had done the same. Then, it was my turn to stand before the light, to face the truth. Every time I had proudly declared the Shahada, every time I had taught my children that Jesus was merely a prophet, every time I had dismissed the Bible as corrupted, all of it, every action, every belief, was laid bare before me. The weight of my errors was almost too much to bear. How could I have been so blind, so certain of my righteousness? But unlike many souls I had seen, my judgment wasn't final. There was a reason I was being shown all of this. The angel told me that I would be given another chance, a chance to return and share what I had learned. But before that could happen, I needed to see more, much more. As the angel guided me toward the light above, I felt the chains of my false beliefs begin to dissolve. It wasn't as though they were torn away suddenly. It was more like they were slowly melting, dissolving into nothingness. The further we moved upward, the brighter the light became. But it wasn't harsh, it wasn't blinding. It was warm, enveloping, like being wrapped in an overwhelming embrace of pure love. The more I felt it, the more I understood that this light wasn't just light. It was the very essence of truth, of love, of God. As I moved higher, I began to see different realms or levels, each more beautiful than the last. It was like ascending through layers of heaven, though not in the way I had been taught to imagine. These weren't the multiple heavens of Islam. No, this was something more profound, more magnificent. It was as though I was seeing the true nature of reality for the first time. And then, amid this overwhelming light, I saw him, Jesus Christ, but not as I had known him from Islamic teachings, not as just a prophet or a man. No, this was the Son of God, standing before me in his divine majesty. His presence was so overpowering, so filled with love, that I feared it would shatter me completely. It was a love so pure, so unconditional, that I could feel it deep in the core of my being. And then, the veil of lies that I had believed about him fell away. As autumn leaves caught in a fierce wind, the falsehoods I had held onto for so long simply blew away. I saw the truth of the Trinity, not three gods as I had been taught, but one God in three persons. It was a mystery, yes, but now it made sense in a way I had never understood before. It was like trying to explain color to someone who had only ever seen in black and white. You can't truly grasp it until you experience it for yourself. And in that moment, I understood. The angel continued to guide me, showing me the real history, not the twisted version I had been taught. I saw Jesus' death on the cross, something I had been told never happened, and his glorious resurrection. I saw the early Christian church and how the message of Christ had spread despite all odds. But then, I was shown the truth of Islam, the way its teachings had been manipulated and distorted over the centuries. I was shown the true origin of Islamic teachings, and how political power and human ambition had shaped a religion I had followed so devoutly. The real Muhammad, the man I had revered as the perfect prophet, was so different from the image I had been taught to worship. But this wasn't shown to condemn Islam or its followers. It was shown to help me understand why so many sincere souls had been led astray. I saw how Satan, over centuries, had carefully crafted this deception, using people's desire for structure, rules, and certainty to guide them away from the one true path to salvation. The angel then took me to what seemed like an enormous library, but instead of books, it was filled with the stories of people's lives. Not just what they had done, but what they could have done. I saw alternate versions of my own life, paths I could have taken if I had accepted the truth sooner. I saw my children growing up free from the chains of false beliefs, their lives full of joy and freedom. I saw my husband and I, not as we were, but as we could have been, leading others to true freedom, to the salvation that had always been within reach, if only I had known sooner. The weight of the revelation was almost unbearable. But at that moment, I also felt a profound sense of hope. I understood for the first time that I had been given a second chance, not just to save myself, but to share this truth with others. I could no longer stay silent. The truth was too powerful, too important. I had to speak out, to share what I had learned, no matter how difficult or painful it might be. For the love I had felt in that light, for the truth that had set me free, was something I couldn't keep to myself. The hardest part came when I was shown the people I had influenced. Friends I had encouraged to be more devout in Islam, neighbors I had invited to the mosque, and, most painfully, my children, whom I had taught to reject Christian beliefs. I had thought I was guiding them toward truth, but in reality, I had been leading them further away. The weight of this revelation crushed me. The angel helped me understand that I would have to answer for more than just my own choices. I was also responsible for the impact I had on others. But even amid this heavy truth, I was shown hope. I saw how my near-death experience would change lives. My testimony would reach Muslims who, like me, had been sincere but misguided. I watched as people heard my story and began questioning their beliefs, setting out on their journeys toward truth. I saw my children with new eyes, realizing that there was still time to undo the damage, to lead them toward the true light. The light around me intensified, becoming almost unbearably bright, and then I found myself in what I can only describe as the throne room of heaven. Every concept of worship I had ever known paled in comparison to what I experienced there. This wasn't the distant, unknowable Allah I had prayed to 5 times a day. This was a Father, a God who knew me completely and loved me perfectly. His presence was overwhelming, not in a fearful way, but in a way that filled me with awe, with a love so vast and deep that I could barely comprehend it. And then, I saw something that transformed my entire understanding of salvation. I watched as souls entered heaven, not because of their own merits or good works, but because they had placed their faith in Jesus Christ. Their lives reflected that faith through sacraments, through acts of love and mercy, but it was never about earning salvation. It was about receiving it as a gift of grace. For the first time, I understood. My religious devotion, my ritual prayers, my fasting, none of it had brought me closer to God. It had been a barrier, a distraction from the truth that salvation could only come through faith in Christ and participation in His sacrifice. I was then allowed to witness conversations in heaven. Souls who had just arrived were meeting Jesus face to face. Some had been Muslims like me, others Hindus, Buddhists, even atheists. The one thing they all had in common was a realization. Many of them had been sure they were right in their beliefs. I heard them say, "But I was so sure." And yet, despite their certainty, they had been wrong. The love they encountered was overwhelming, but for some, it was too late. Then, the angel took me to see something I never expected: the saints from Christian history. They weren't distant, unapproachable figures. They were alive, vibrant, and filled with joy. I saw them worshiping alongside former Muslims, people who had found the truth before it was too late. There was no hierarchy, no division, just a shared celebration of God's grace. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 2 below to let me know that you are still here with me. I realized that everything I had believed about faith, salvation, and God's love had been turned upside down. But it wasn't terrifying, it was freeing. I had been blind, but now I could see. I had been bound, but now I was free. And I knew, without a doubt, that I had to return and share this truth with as many as I could before time ran out. This was the most difficult part of my journey. I was shown hell, not just as separation from God, but as a place of real torment. The flames weren't merely symbolic. They represented the unbearable anguish of an existence without God's presence. There were no demons with pitchforks, no theatrical tortures, just the excruciating suffering of souls who realized, too late, what they had lost. I saw religious leaders I had once respected, people whose teachings had led thousands astray. Their torment was intensified by the weight of their influence. Each soul who arrived because of their false guidance only added to their suffering. Yet, even in their agony, they acknowledged the justice of their fate. They had prayed, they had fasted, they had devoted their lives to what they believed was the truth, but they had missed salvation. They had prayed to a God of their own making, hitting what looked like a ceiling of brass, not because God didn't hear them, but because they had never truly known Him. I saw how Satan had used their sincerity against them, keeping them trapped in religious performance while ensuring they never encountered the true Christ. Then, the angel showed me something even more personal: my future if I chose to return. I saw rejection from my Muslim community, struggles within my own family, and accusations of betrayal. There would be suffering, emotional, spiritual, even physical. But then, I saw something greater. I saw the lives that would be transformed because of my testimony. I saw Muslims who would hear my story and begin questioning their beliefs, just as I had. I saw my children, no longer burdened by false doctrine but free in Christ. The angel made it clear, this path would be difficult, but its significance would echo into eternity. Then came the choice. I could stay in heaven, surrounded by the peace and love I had longed for my entire life. Or I could return, stepping back into a world that would reject me, a life that would be filled with trials. Part of me wanted so desperately to stay. But then I saw the people who would be impacted. Faces of men and women, even children, who would come to know the truth because of my return. I saw my own family, my children. And I knew what I had to do. Before I left, the angel showed me one last vision, my judgment day, but from the perspective of having completed my mission. I saw myself standing before Jesus, no longer as a stranger, but as my Savior. I heard the words that made every hardship worth it. "Well done, good and faithful servant." The joy of that moment far outweighed any suffering I would endure on earth. Coming back was like being squeezed through a narrow tunnel. Pain shot through my chest as I gasped for air. The bright hospital lights burned my eyes after the pure radiance of heaven. The first thing I saw was Kareem, tears streaming down his face as he held my hand. My children were there too, their eyes red from crying. The doctors said it was a miracle I survived, that carbon monoxide poisoning rarely left people unscathed. But I knew it wasn't luck. When we were alone, I tried to tell my family what I had seen. Kareem looked at me with pity, assuming it was confusion from the lack of oxygen. Amir and Zayn exchanged worried glances. Nobody wanted to believe that their devout Muslim wife and mother were claiming to have encountered Jesus. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of my life. Word spread quickly in our Muslim community. Friends I had known for decades stopped answering my calls. The imam came to visit, gently suggesting I needed psychiatric help. My parents called from Pakistan, crying and begging me to take back what I was saying. Kareem, at first, was patient. He thought it was a phase, something I would grow out of. But when I stopped attending mosque, when I started going to church, participating in the sacraments, and engaging in works of mercy inspired by my new faith, things became tense. He would find me praying the rosary, reading the Bible, understanding verses I had been taught to ignore or misinterpret. We fought about what to tell the children, about whether I was having a breakdown. But then, something incredible happened. People began reaching out to me in secret. Muslims had their doubts and their questions. A friend from the mosque whispered to me that she had been secretly attending church services, curious about the sacraments. My daughter, Amira, started asking questions, not to argue, but to understand. Despite the rejection, despite the suffering, I saw what God was doing. The truth was spreading. And I knew, without a doubt, that I had made the right choice. 6 months after my encounter, I was invited to speak at a small church. I was terrified, unsure of how to begin, uncertain if anyone would listen. But the moment I started sharing my story, something inside me shifted. The words came, and I found myself speaking from a place deeper than I had ever known. People were crying, some in disbelief, others in conviction. Even a few Muslims who had come out of curiosity were moved. That day, 3 people accepted Christ, choosing baptism as a sign of their faith and committing to lives dedicated to good works. Now, 2 years later, our home has become a sort of unofficial meeting place. Every week, seekers come to us with questions. Former Muslims, doubters, people who've had their own supernatural experiences. Kareem still hasn't accepted my new faith, but he's softened. Just last week, I caught him reading the Gospel of John when he thought I was asleep. I didn't say anything, just smiled quietly to myself. The death threats have mostly stopped, though I still receive nasty messages on social media. But it doesn't bother me anymore. Once you've seen what I've seen, once you know the truth about eternity, the temporary struggles of this life lose their power. What matters is what's eternal. My biggest joy came 3 months ago when Amir, my daughter, told me that she had been secretly praying to Jesus. She'd had her own encounter with God's love while reading the Bible I'd given her. She expressed a deep desire to participate in the sacraments and live out her faith through acts of charity. It was like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Zayn is still wrestling with it all, asking thoughtful questions, and trying to make sense of everything. Every night, I thank God for giving me this second chance. I'm grateful beyond words that He let me come back, and that He allowed me to share my testimony and help others find the truth. I know my story sounds unbelievable. 2 years ago, I would have dismissed it as crazy too. But I can't deny what I saw, what I experienced, and I can't stay silent. Too many souls are at stake. Too many sincere people are on the wrong path, just like I was. If even one person finds the truth through my testimony, everything I've lost, every relationship, every moment of rejection, will have been worth it. So, after hearing about this incredible journey, I want to ask you, what have you learned from this story? What part resonated with you the most? Take a moment to reflect, and share in the comments below one thing you've learned and will bring into practice in your own life. Your thoughts and experiences might inspire someone else on their journey. If you found this video meaningful, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Your support helps us continue bringing powerful stories like this to more people.